Drummers Against Implied Timekeeping, Richard D. Albus. This video is called The 5 Greatest Avant-Garde Drummers of All Time. I want to talk about specific drummers in a very small and specific style, dealing with avant-garde. For those of you who don't know what avant-garde music may pertain to, it would be music that is completely improvisational. There is some direction to it, but it is free form in the extreme. There's lots of notes, or there's no notes at all. But it deals with textures and just forms that are outside the norm. Just so you know, as a disclaimer, this is my opinion and my opinion only. So I'm going to get into the 5 guys I want those of you who come and visit on this channel to know about. If you're a younger drummer, or you're a very experienced drummer, you should know these 5, all right? You have to know them. It's in a style of music, as I say, that is just extremely, the word would be esoteric, very, very small. But these guys were very powerful, and I was fortunate enough, I believe, to see all of them. I think I did. Maybe one I didn't, but I want you to know them, and I want to talk about them, and I want to talk about avant-garde, but how it pertains to drummers. I grew up in a New York metropolitan area, and it was the hometown of a major, large university. So I was in kind of a geographic location where a lot of avant-garde artists in the late 60s, early 70s, mid-70s, into the late 70s and 80s came to perform and speak as well. By maybe a series of accidents, older musicians that my brother knew and friends of friends or whatever would take me. I would actually, maybe 15, 16 years old, see avant-garde players. And I still didn't know what the heck was going on, you know, I didn't enjoy it as much, but it's some stuff I did enjoy a lot. You know, it depended, but I was exposed to it at a very young age. And I come away with it very positively, but I want to give you some criteria. There is a Ritchie rule, my own personal rule in effect. And the Ritchie rule, after all these years of playing drums for 50 years, the Ritchie rule says you cannot indulge yourself to play avant-garde music unless you have high technical skills. So if you're a classical player, jazz player, or rock player, your technical ability has to be at just a really high level. Otherwise, the validity of the performance, the legitimacy of the performance is, to me, not worth it. You have to just have extremely good skills to be able, as I said, to indulge, to play a free form such as avant-garde, and to do it effectively and with meaning. Otherwise, it becomes just noise. Now, I'm going to deal mostly with jazz. I am not going to discuss classical music, although there's a lot of great classical composers who deal with very avant-garde styles of music. Come to mind would be Edvard Varese, maybe Webern, Klaus Webern, Stockhausen to a certain extent, and various other classical forms that have written pieces. But I'm going to deal with avant-garde in either jazz or in rock, all right? Because that's what I saw and enjoyed. And the first drummer I want all of you to know about, I assume most of you are drummers, the 5th greatest avant-garde drummer is a guy named Rashid Ali. I think he was born with the name William Patterson. Rashid Ali played with John Coltrane just before the end of Coltrane's life. Coltrane became very religious towards the end of his life. He died in 1967. But around 1964-65, Coltrane, who has extreme technical skills and can indulge playing avant-garde music, as I said, started to play free form in ways that were never really heard before. and Rashid Ali, with Elvin. Some gigs he would do with Elvin, some he wouldn't. Rashid Ali was the drummer. And I remember this record came out, a friend had it, I listened to it, of course I didn't know what the heck was going on. It was called Meditations. Coltrane was a huge star because he had made A Love Supreme in '64, and he did Giant Steps, you know, one of the classic jazz records in 1959. But by 1965, 66, and towards when he passed in '67, Rashid was Coltrane's drummer. I want any drummer who's coming on my channel that's dealing with what I'm dealing with to know Rashid Ali. And he's on YouTube, I think he is. He had his own band and he did various things. His technical skills were flawless for straight-ahead bop jazz. Fantastic. And he became famous, obviously, when he was playing with Coltrane. Know this guy because he's just a great feel. When Coltrane would just do, let's say, a long line of notes, Rashid would answer them in great and beautiful ways. And I look back on them now. I started listening maybe 2 years ago. Thank God for YouTube. You can just pop it in, you know, like let's listen to Rashid Ali. Know this man, okay? That's the 5th greatest avant-garde drummer ever. Number 4, I want to talk a little bit about Billy Hart. Billy Hart is most famous for playing on a Herbie Hancock record called Sextant. I think it's around 1971, 72. Don't hold me to it. Early 70s. Billy Hart was a great jazz straight-ahead player, but I just loved what he did on the Sextant album. Know this record. If you're on coming with what I'm doing, I think you'll be better served as a drummer and a musician if you know who Billy Hart is. He was really great. And this Sextant album by Herbie Hancock is not a famous record of his. In fact, it might be the least popular record he ever made. And of course, I had to cut out a bargain basement 50-cent copy, and I loved it. So I highly recommend listening to that Herbie Hancock Sextant. Let me know what you think of that. Billy Hart was the drummer. Number 3 is not in the jazz idiom. And I want any of you guys to know this guy, and I love him very much, and that was Anton, or is Anton Fier. He played with Pere Ubu, P-E-R-E-U-B-U, and he also played with the Golden Palominos. He also played with Bill Laswell and various other things. He even played with Bob Mould on the Black Sheets of Rain album in 1990. He's a producer, he's a composer. Anton Fier. Now that's not to be confused with Anton Fig, great drummer in his own right, but Anton Fier for avant-garde music is just extraordinary. He just has his feel for rock and progressive music and pop, and can mix it in interchangeably. He is a great drummer, Anton Fier, and you guys may not know who he is. And just kind of dig into the work that he did with Bill Laswell, the bass player, I think, and Fred Frith, the guitar player. He has some recordings on YouTube. He's in the rock idiom. He can play jazz, I'm sure, and his technical chops, of course, were fantastic. But Anton Fier needs to be known by you guys. If you don't know him, find out about the guy. Number 3, greatest avant-garde drummer there is. Number 2, this guy, Charles Moffett. Charles Moffett was the drummer with Ornette Coleman. Now, Ornette Coleman is a legend of the Reed Instruments. Ornette in the 60s was just really doing some of the most cutting-edge avant-garde playing. And I'm of the thinking he was made better because he had this guy, Charles Moffett on drums. Please go on YouTube, know Charles Moffett. You must know him. He wasn't famous. Well, I should say he did have some notoriety because when Ornette would play, Ornette is a legend, but Charles kind of embraced what Ornette was doing and brought it to bear on drums. He's obviously was in the jazz idiom, and he can play straight ahead jazz great. He follows the Ritchie rule. He has extraordinary chops, technical skills, and he indulged, and really he's left an indelible mark on avant-garde music and drummers in general. So no Charles Moffett, all right? That guy, you know, they would play three-piece or sometimes four-piece. He'd incorporate kinds of different instruments on his drum set as well. But his use of cymbals and the way he would interpret Ornette's angular playing and do long-winded loops, fantastic, all right? Know who he is. And the #1 greatest avant-garde drummer ever, and he is my idol, and the guy's name is Andrew Cyrille. And Andrew Cyrille out of Boston, Massachusetts, played with Cecil Taylor, the pianist. And in the 60s and 70s, Cecil Taylor was a tremendous, legitimate player. You know, he could play jazz standards, and he had technical skills, no question. But he was an avatar of avant-garde music. And his drummer, Andrew Cyrille, is just my favorite. I got to see Andrew Cyrille, and I was just floored at the ability of this guy to play powerfully loud, super soft, powerfully loud, super soft. And if you can, listen, if you can handle it, Cecil Taylor, the pianist, and his drummer, Andrew Cyrille. I think Andrew's still alive. I think he is. And he actually gave drum lessons. And I never had a drum lesson with him, but if any of these you guys that are listening had a drum lesson with Andrew Cyrille, I would love to talk to you. I would love to know what that was about. All right? So Andrew Cyrille needs to be acknowledged as the greatest, or one of the greatest, avant-garde drummers of all times. And of course, the others I've just mentioned. I want to add a couple of notes as well. Chris Cutler of Henry Cow is an avant-garde drummer, not of the highest technical skill, but he was on the forefront of avant-garde playing in the 60s. Henry Cow was this just unusual band, and Chris Cutler was right there. You got to understand, there were bands in the 60s in England that I was not exposed to at the time. I didn't get to hear them until the late 70s. Soft Machine comes to mind. No Soft Machine, please, no Soft Machine. No Henry Cow, because these are bands that were very experimental. And most interesting, you know, Pink Floyd, before they became Pink Floyd, even before they were signed, were considered an avant-garde band in England in the, like maybe 1965, before they had a record deal. So they helped a lot of avant-garde musicians, Pink Floyd. And of course, when they had Sid, he really was the avant-garde artist of the band. And so, hats off to him. I gotta give credit where credit is due. That he brought kind of a unique perspective to taking, let's say, songs and taking them out to an improvisational part that had never been done before. By the way, I'm thinking of another guy. Well, the guy in Soft Machine was Robert Wyatt. Know who Robert Wyatt was, because Soft Machine is one of these bands that was unheralded. Alan Holdsworth played, the guitarist, fabulous guitarist, played in Soft Machine later on, but Robert Wyatt was one of the original guys. Know who they are and understand it, all right? I also comes to mind is Paul Motian, M-O-T-I-A-N. You know, Paul was a composer, he wrote, and he played mainstream jazz, but he also played avant-garde. And I want those of you to remember Paul Motian, you know who he is a little bit. But of the drummers I've mentioned, the 5 top guys, you know those guys the best, all right? So it's Rashid Ali, Billy Hart, Anton Fair, definitely, Charles Moffett, and Andrew Cyrille. Something else comes to mind. Another drummer who's a great jazz player who did play avant-garde was Billy Higgins. Not to be confused with Billy Hart. He deserves a mention as well. I liked him very much when he was in Los Angeles. He did a lot and helped a lot of drummers go towards an improvisational form, such as Avant-Garde, and he had great chops. So he was great, okay? Now, if you have any questions, and I'm not sure how you feel about avant-garde music, feel free to ask me. I'll answer as best I can in the comments section. And of course, I'm on Facebook.com/Drummers Against Implied Timekeeping and Twitter.com/Drummers Against. And I want to welcome everybody who's coming here for the very first time. I have a huge catalog of videos, and they deal mostly with teaching drums in the open-handed position. This is what I've been trying to do since I started this channel to enhance your creativity. But every once in a while, I want to expose drummers to my experience that goes back 50 years now of who I saw and what I had seen. And I want to apply it to the basic ideas of where I'm teaching on the technical level. All right? And if you haven't, please subscribe, because your subscription is the support, and I thank you for that always. I also have a Patreon account, patreon.com/Richard P. Dalbus. Your support is greatly appreciated. I love doing these, I guess, maybe talks, and I don't really like rating drummers. The 5 greatest avant-garde drummers sounds a little strange to me, but I'll post it as that. Because these 5 guys, especially Andrew Cyril, have to be known by those of you who may not. All right? It's such a small segment, and these guys to do this all the time for a career is just extraordinary in and of itself, because people aren't really going to pay to hear some guy just go improvisationally around the drums in such a way that may not be something that you're used to. But they're real artists and real musicians and deserve our respect. So regardless of the level you're at, know these people. And I'll be glad to tell you just a little more things of maybe where you should look for them. But they are on YouTube, I'm sure of it. All right? Let me know what you think. I've got some things coming where I'm going to go back to some of the original videos I had shot on some beats and show you kind of a better version of them. And that's what I'm planning coming up. But for now, let me know what you think of these 5 guys. Take care. My best.